this video, I interview Joe Dimeo from Shorefire Studios in Long Branch, New Jersey. The times that I've recorded there, I've just been really impressed with his drum sound. So I wanted to pick his brain, and he was kind enough to allow me to film that, answered all my questions, talked about mic choice, mic placement, signal chain, and also, if you're into vintage gear, where do you see his racks and racks and racks of vintage gear? It's something to behold. So I thought, yeah, this will be a good sort of educational opportunity for not just me, but for you guys. I sat on this for well over a year because I had some personal issues in my life that I had to deal with. I'm finally going to release it, warts and all, and I hope that you guys get something out of it. So here it is. Talk about this board a little bit.
So this console is a console called the Helios Console. And for me, growing up, playing guitar in the 70s and stuff, my influences were Zeppelin and Deep Purple and the Stones and the Who and the Beatles, all those great bands from the early 70s and late 60s. And, as I got further and further into the recording thing, doing my research, I found out that practically all of them recorded on Helios consoles. Phil Collins, In the Air Tonight, Peter Gabriel's big record, So, Queen.
How did you get it?
When I wanted to replace the console, the MCI here at Shorefire, I knew I wanted a Helios. And when I was searching around and scouring the world to find one, this was the one that was available. This was in storage in Hoboken, so I bought it without hearing what it sounded like. But I knew what it was. I knew the pedigree. I knew that it couldn't be bad. So when I was fortunate enough, I had the bread to purchase one. This is what I got.
So, all right, now the other part of the sound that you get here is your outboard gear.
These are obviously multi-effect units. We have some delays and we have some phase shifters and flangers and reverbs and stuff like that. But here is where it starts to get more into the really cool stuff. We have, again, outboard EQs and compressors, EQs and mic pre's. This particular one is a Trident A range. It's two channels from a Trident console that was very popular back in the 70s. Queen and Bowie and a lot of bands recorded at Trident Studios because of the A-range consoles. This is two channels from one of the consoles. These EQs here are the quintessential tube EQs ever made. They're called Pultecs. And, Pultecs are the shit, man.
So what about as far as the drums? Because that's all I really care.
Well, so we have some more compressors over here, classic stuff, Uri compressors and Altex and DBX and things like that. And then over in this land over here, that's the Pro Tools stuff. But over here is where really the cool stuff for me happens. Down here on the bottom, these black ones are the original Helios EQ mic pre's out of the very early consoles. These particular ones came from a studio in London called Island Studios, Zeppelin 2, everybody. So this particular one is from the Stones Mobile. So these are the original Helios EQ mic pre's. And they have a sound that's different than the console. But again, that's another discussion for another time.
Right.
And then we have the Focusrite, two channels of EQ and mic pre, and then above them are the original, some original Neve 80 series EQ mic pre's. Everybody knows what a 1073 is, and I have a couple of 1073s, a couple of 1084s, a couple of 1066s, a couple of 1091s, and we have Neve compressors, some API stuff, some Telefunken tube mic pre's up there. So, but for me, and the sound that I like, there's nothing like Neve preamp and EQs for drums. I mean, they just have a sound. It's the transformers that are inside of those things. It's there's so many factors. But for me, for great rock, rock drum sounds, there's nothing like it. So I only have 8. So basically, the kick, the snare, and the toms are going through those. And then everything else, the overheads, the room microphones, the ride microphone, the hi-hat microphone go through the desk. So it's, a little bit of a hybrid setup. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with using the desk for the whole thing. I mean, many records were made on this console with, just using the mic pre and the EQs and the board. But I like what Neves do for what I want to hear for rock drums. And I was fortunate enough to get into the business at a time when before the advent of the internet, and I was able to buy all this stuff when it didn't cost, the crazy prices that things go for now. I could never do it now. I mean, you'd have to be a multimillionaire to furnish a studio with the gear that I have. All of the outboard gear is wired into a patch bay.
Right.
And so I have access to every piece of equipment in the studio via the patch bay.
Uh-huh.
So for instance, if I'm taking these Neve mic pre's and EQs, they're on a patch point here somewhere.
Right.
And then I patch them in to the input of Pro Tools. So it goes directly from the output of the EQ mic pre to the input of Pro Tools.
Right.
So all the inputs and outputs of Pro Tools also come up on the patch bay.
So do you ever just mix in the box?
It's kind of a hybrid system for me. You know.
Okay.
I run everything through the console. The outputs come back out of Pro Tools through the console, but I try and use as much of the plugins and do all the automation inside of the computer.
Right.
So it's not mixing in the box as much as I'm using the automation and all the features for the recallability.
Right.
You know, because guys leave and they want to come back. Oh, you know, let's bring the kick drum up a little bit. Let's bring the guitar down. Whatever it is. You know,
Sure.
a week later, a month later, a year later, we could do it that way because
Sure.
I'm not using, you know, a ton of outboard gear, say, on the mix. I mean, I do use some stuff
Yeah.
in the mix, and I'll take notes, but I try and, you know, really do most of the plug-in stuff and the automation in the computer. And my opinion is that, no, they do not sound like the original. So that's why I like using all of, as much of it I can in the tracking tools. But then, you know, for mixing, like I said, you know, I'll use an emulation if I have to. You
Right.
know, I'll certainly use, you know, delays and reverbs, you know, inside of Pro Tools. And, you know, so yeah, I mean, it's a hybrid setup for me. All right.
Let's go talk about you know, the mics and the drums and all that.
There you go.
All right, so I see before me a plethora of microphones. So explain a little bit about your methodology in terms of mics, placement, that kind of thing.
Let me just, you know, preface it all by saying that the drums have to sound good at the source. It's going to make, you know, my job a lot easier.
Right.
And so, you know, obviously we have really good drums here. We have DW Collector Series. But I think more importantly than the drum set is that we have you and the way you attack the drums. So I try and, you know, come out and listen to that sound and see if I can get it to sound like that in the control room. So that's my goal.
So let's start with the kick, because that, to me, is the kick sound you get is incredible.
All right, well, you know, again, so going back to the drum has to sound good. And this particular drum is I think it's 18 by 24. So it has a big sound to begin with.
It does.
So the drum itself, you know, is a good sounding drum. So let's talk about the three mics. So 3 different microphones on one source. So I'm trying to get them to blend to make one sound. So on, you know, kind of on the inside of the drum is just a standard Shure Beta 58. And that's the one that gives us all the attack,
right,
and all the kind of clickiness that.
So that,
you know,
because it's close to the head, it's
yeah,
closest
to the head, yeah. And then in the middle of the drum is a Neumann U47 FET. Again, just a great large diaphragm condenser microphone that gives us all the body of the drum. You know, hopefully the resonant and you know all the tone of the drum will come from that microphone.
Okay.
And then last one is that we have a speaker on this, and that's a Yamaha NS10. I wish that I could take credit for it, but guys have been doing it for many decades. But so we're using that as a sub. So anything, you know, all the low frequency stuff is coming from that. You know, if you were to solo that microphone, listen to it by itself, it doesn't sound great. I mean, it actually sounds like ass if you listen to it by itself. But when you blend it in with the other microphones, then that's where all the girth of the bass drum comes from, is from that sub. And the kick drum is, you know, where all the energy comes from anyway in the drum set, right? So I think for this particular session, we're going to have 16 microphones.
So 16 tracks of drums.
So let me verify.
So
we got 3 on the kick, 2 on the snare is 5, 1 each on the toms is 4, that's 9. Pair of overheads are 11. Hi-hat and ride is
12,
13. And then we have 2 room microphones that we can't really see because of the depth of the room, but they're all the ways in the back of the room, about 25 feet away, probably 15 or 20 feet up.
Yeah, I see them.
That's 15, and then we have 1 mono room microphone here, which is 16. That's an old RCA ribbon microphone.
So on the snare, we have the classic, is that a 57?
Close, 56. It's an SM56, an old Unidyne. And the reason why I kind of like that is because it has the, you can adjust the angle of it, you know, so you can get in there and, you know, get it pretty close to the snare. And again, you know, hopefully, you know, not get a lot of hi-hat bleed from it.
And what's underneath?
And underneath of it is a newer microphone by a company called Josephson. That's called an E22S. You know, it's a small diaphragm condenser, and it's just a great mic that takes SPLs really good. You don't need to pad it, and you know, I wish I had, you know, 16 of them. I would use them on every drum.
And that leaves the toms.
Yeah, we have the toms. You know,
So what are you using on the toms?
So on the toms, I'm using these Audio-Technica microphones. I believe the model number on the smaller ones are ATM-23s, and the ones on the floor toms are ATM-25s. They don't make them anymore. So, but for me, they're like a 421 on a steroid.
Right.
You know,
right.
they do everything a 421 does, but they sound bigger to me. And you know, I think it's a hypercardioid pattern. So you know, there's not a lot of you know, the leakage factor is good. You know, you can see we have a cymbal relatively close to the microphone, so you're not getting a ton of bleed from you know, the cymbals, you know, leaking through on those microphones. So you're a very, you know, dynamic player, you know, so when you're playing on the ride, you're not always just you know, smashing the shit out of it on the bell. You know, you got a lot of dynamics going there. So I feel we needed to have a spot mic on the ride cymbal, just so, you know, we could, you know, if we needed to boost it a little bit, you know, as you know, we weren't getting enough from the overheads.
And what is that?
That's a Neumann small diaphragm condenser, a KM84. And I also have one on the hi-hat, the same microphone. So as you can see, you know, I have a combination of ribbon microphones. You know, the overheads are Coles 4038s that were very popular at Abbey Road Studios. It's probably where they gained their popularity. You know, use them on Ringo's kit. You know, just a, you know, really, they sound, you know, very natural sounding, for lack of a better term, and you know, they're not overly hyped. You know, but they don't produce a lot of you know, nasty mid-range. All of the drums themselves are going through the Neve EQ preamplifiers.
Each one of these has its own.
Each one. So the 3 kick drum microphones.
Oh my God.
The snare drum mics. And the toms. They're all going through the Neves.
Yeah.
The individual Neves. And then the rest of the microphones are going through the console, the Helios console.
Okay. Wow. So the Neve preamps that also have EQ. Are you messing with the EQ at all?
Some things I am. Some things I'm EQing a little bit. You know, on the kick drum for sure. You know, I mean, probably, you know, on this FET microphone, I'm scooping out. You know, I'm going to get a little technical, but probably somewhere in the 250 cycle range. You know, and taking out some of that to give it some meat.
So you're cutting?
I'm cutting frequency. Yeah, I'm a big fan
okay.
of cutting frequencies as opposed to boosting.
What, like -4, minus?
Whatever, you know, wherever it sounds good. You know, I mean, sometimes it might be a hell of a lot. It might be 10 or 12 dB. It depends on, you know, what the source is, you know. But the kick and the snare for me and the overheads are the focus. You know, everything else is, you know, we want to make them sound good, of course, and get the best tone we can. But, you know, all the energy for me comes from the kick, the snare, and the overheads.
All this talk about the drums and the mics and me standing, now I want to play. So let's record a track.
All right, let's go see what we can make happen, all right?
All right.
Cool, bro. Don't leave me hanging.
All right.